Hey, have you heard any good books lately? This is Talking Audiobooks, your weekly podcast for all news, discussion, and opinion surrounding the wonderful world of audiobooks. Hello, everyone. This is Casey Trowbridge, the host of the Talking Audiobooks podcast, bringing you a Talking Audiobooks sale alert for the Audible $4.95 win-win sale. This sale is available to Audible members only. It runs from now through September 17th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. And the sale features over 300 titles, all on sale for just $4.95. The titles are grouped into categories of fiction, mysteries and thrillers, romance, young adult, science fiction, and nonfiction. And in this sale alert, we're going to talk about some of the books that I already own that are in this sale. We're going to talk about some of the books that I purchased in this sale as well. One of the most noteworthy titles in this sale is a book that we have talked about on the Talking Audiobooks podcast before. It is the 2017 Audio Publishers Association Audio Award winner for Audiobook of the Year, and I speak of Hamilton the Revolution by Lin-Manuel Miranda and Jeremy McCarter, narrated by Lin-Manuel Miranda, Jeremy McCarter, and Mariska Hargitay. And of course, we played an excerpt of this one when it won the Audie for the 2017 Audiobook of the Year. And so now it is on sale for just $4.95. So if you heard that excerpt on the show and added it to your wish list, or if it was already on your wish list, or is just something you were waiting to pick up, now is a pretty good opportunity to do exactly that, as it is on sale for just $4.95. There are a few titles in this win-win sale that I already own. A couple of them are by James Patterson. Invisible was one of the first James Patterson novels I ever listened to on audiobook after someone suggested that I give his work a try. And the other one is his first installment in the NYPD Red series, which is a series about a special police unit in New York that specializes in dealing with crimes involving the rich and famous. And NYPD Red is a Patterson series that I enjoy. It's not my favorite Patterson series, but it's one where I've seen improvement in every installment in the series. So the second book is better than the first, third book is better than the second, and the fourth book is better than the third. There are 4 books out now. The 5th one is out in 2018. I think the first one laid a good foundation. I just think that the authors have gotten more comfortable with the characters since then, and things have really improved. So that one has caught my attention as being part of the sale as well. Another one that I haven't listened to yet, but is getting a lot of acclaim, is Dennis E. Taylor's We Are Legion, We Are Bob. It's the first book in his Bobbyverse trilogy, narrated by Ray Porter, who we featured a few weeks ago on the Talking Audiobooks podcast when we interviewed Felicia Sparks. I'm a big fan of Ray's narration. I picked this book up earlier this year because it was something that appealed to me as a science fiction reader. I haven't listened to it yet, but that is hopefully going to change very, very soon. And it's one that has certainly gotten a lot of acclaim from listeners. And another book that I own that is in this sale is On Target. It's the second novel in Mark Greeny's Gray Man series, and I really enjoyed it, and I picked up all of the subsequent novels in the series. Jay Snyder narrates this one, and I really enjoy this series. As I mentioned, Mark Greeny did a lot of work with Tom Clancy and took over writing the Jack Ryan Universe series for a while after Clancy's death, along with Grant Lockwood, and this is his own work, and I really enjoyed On Target. I've actually listened to this one. It's a lot of fun as well. I'm digging the Gray Man series quite a bit. But the one that caught my attention the most is The Innocent. This is the first novel in David Baldacci's Will Roby series. David Baldacci is my favorite author going right now, I think. I think he does a lot of good stuff with character and character development and creating sympathetic characters. This is one of my favorite Baldacci series. This is narrated by Ron McClarty and Orla Cassidy. This is one that I really enjoy, as I said, and I'm going to play an excerpt of it right now. Here is the first installment in David Baldacci's Will Roby series, The Innocent, narrated by Orla Cassidy and Ron McClarty, and this book can be found in the Win-Win sale currently going on at audible.com, and we'll be back right after this excerpt.
Hours later, his internal clock woke him. He left his room and walked up toward Princes Street. He passed the majestic Balmoral Hotel that anchored the city center. He ordered a light meal and had tap water to drink, ignoring the large selection of stouts offered on the board over the bar. As he ate, he spent some time gazing at a street performer, juggling butcher knives atop a unicycle, while regaling the crowd with funny stories, delivered with an embellished Scottish brogue. Then there was the fellow outfitted as the Invisible Man, taking pictures with passers-by for £2 each. After his meal, he walked toward Edinburgh Castle. He could see it in the distance as he ambled along. It was big, imposing, and had never once been taken by force, only stealth. He climbed to the top of the castle, peering over the gloom of the Scottish capital. He ran his hand along cannon that would never fire another shot. He turned to his left and took in the full breadth of the sea that had made Edinburgh such an important port centuries ago, as vessels came and went, disgorging freight and picking up fresh cargo. He stretched tight limbs, felt a creak, and then a pop in his left shoulder. 40. Tomorrow. But first, he had to make it to tomorrow. He checked his watch. 3 hours to go. He left the castle and headed down a side street. He waited out a sudden, chilly rain shower under a cafe awning and drank a cup of coffee. Later, he passed a sign for the ghost tour of underground Edinburgh, adults only, and only conducted after full darkness had set in. It was almost time. Roby had memorized every step, every turn, every move he would have to make. To live. As he did every time, he had to hope it would be enough. Will Roby did not want to die in Edinburgh. A bit later, he passed a man who nodded at him. It was just a slight dip of the head, nothing more. Then the man was gone, and Roby turned down the doorway the man had vacated. He shut and locked it behind him and moved forward, quickening his pace. His shoes were rubber-soled. They made no sound on the stone floor. 600 feet in, he saw the door on the right side. He took it. An old monk's cloak was hung on a peg. He donned it and put the hood up. There were other things there for him, all necessary. Gloves, night vision goggles, a recorder, a Glock pistol with suppressor can attached, and a knife. He waited, checking his watch every 5 minutes. His watch was synced to the very second with someone else's. He opened another door and passed through it. He moved downward, reached a grate in the floor, lifted it, and skittered down a set of iron handrails set into the stone. He hit the floor silently, moved left, counted off his paces. Above him was Edinburgh, at least the new part. He was in underground Edinburgh now, home to several ghost and walking tours. There were the vaults under South Bridge, and parts of old Edinburgh such as Mary King's Close, among others. He glided down the dark brick and stone passages, his powered goggles letting him see everything in crisp definition. Electric lamps on the walls were set at fairly regular intervals, but it was still very dark down here. He could almost hear the voices of the dead around him. It was part of local lore that when the plague came in the 1600s, it struck impoverished areas of the city, such as Mary King's Close, especially hard. And in response, the city walled up folks here forever to prevent the spread of the disease. Roby didn't know if that was true or not, but it wouldn't surprise him if it were. That's what civilization sometimes did to threats, real or perceived. They walled them off, us against them, survival of the fittest. You die, so I can live. He checked his watch. 10 minutes to go. He moved slower, adjusting his pace so he would arrive seconds before he was supposed to, just in case. He heard them before he saw them. There were 5, not counting.
Now I'm going to talk about the books that I purchased from this sale that's currently going on at Audible. I picked up 7, 5 of which are fiction titles, 2 of which are nonfiction titles. I'll handle the fiction titles first. 2 of them are titles that are in series that I listen to on a regular basis. The first one is Persuader, which is the 7th book in Lee Child's Jack Reacher series. This is a series I got into a couple years ago thanks to another Audible sale, and I've been steadily working my way through it ever since, and so I'm happy to be able to pick this one up off my wish list as part of this sale. Another book is The Wrong Side of Goodbye. It is the 21st book in Michael Connelly's Harry Bosch universe series. Just in time, the 22nd book comes out later this year, so I'm happy to pick this one up as well. This one is narrated by Titus Welliver. Then there are 2 novels that I grabbed by authors that I listened to, but these are standalone novels as opposed to being part of a series. The first one is Hold Tight by Harlan Coben, and the second one is The Survivor by Greg Hurwitz. And both of these titles are narrated by the wonderful Scott Brick. So picking them up was really a no-brainer. I didn't even look at the book summaries. I saw the names Coben and Hurwitz and the name Scott Brick, and I was sold pretty much immediately. So those are 4 of the 5 fiction titles I picked up. That's from the mysteries and thrillers category. The final title that I picked up is one that I heard about on a podcast. It was a podcast I only listened to once, and it was an episode that featured audiobook narrators, and one of the narrators is William Demerit, who narrates the audiobook that I'm about to talk about and play an excerpt of. And this is Ben Winter's Underground Airlines, and this one intrigued me. I like the concept of it. Basically, what this one is about is our world is exactly the same. We have smartphones and Happy Meals and all the things that we are accustomed to today. The only difference is that the Civil War never happened, and I will let it sink in what that could mean and where the story could be headed from there. You can probably guess by the title of Underground Airlines, but just in case, I thought I would play an excerpt of it right now. I picked this one up. It was on my wish list for a while, and this is one where I kept saying I would get around to it eventually, but I sometimes put books on my wish list and intend to keep them in there waiting for a sale. And this is one of those books where I figured it would probably be on sale eventually, and it was, and now that it is, I eagerly picked it up. So here is William Demerit reading an excerpt of Ben Winter's Underground Airlines, part of the Audible.com win-win sale currently going on.
Chapter 2. I've been free since I was 14 years old. And on this particular evening, as my dashboard GPS navigated me through the unfamiliar streets of Indianapolis, I was approaching my 40th birthday. The great bulk of my life then had been passed outside the hard four, in the free part of the land of the free. But even after all these years, I still found myself astonished daily by the small miracles of liberty. Just walking out of a restaurant with a clear head and a full stomach, holding a styrofoam box with leftover food inside it, just lingering in the parking lot for a minute before getting in the car, smelling the wet asphalt, feeling a light drizzle as it condensed on my forehead. Just knowing I could take a walk around the block if I wanted to, go to a park and sit on a bench and read a newspaper. Just getting in that car and feeling the vinyl give under my ass, feeling the cough and purr of the engine. All these things were small astonishments, miracles of freedom. I was in a modest Nissan Altima with a serviceable 175 horsepower engine and a dull tan interior, but I enjoyed driving it a whole lot. For most of my driving years, you couldn't get a Japanese car because the Japanese were signatories on the European Consensus, blocked from most trade with the United States. Luckily for me, a new prime minister had been elected in 2012 and switched them over to a policy of stakeholder influence, a phrase borrowed from the Israelis. Hate the sin, love the sinner. Open borders mean open dialogue, that whole line. I don't give much of a about international diplomacy, but I loved that Altima. It started up with no trouble. The heater worked, and the wipers worked, and the brakes and the windows and the tape deck worked too. I drove north on Meridian Street carefully, away from the Fountain Diner, away from Father Barton and his empty apologies. The world I heard described on the radio was the same as the one I could see through the streaky window of the car. Gray and ugly, redolent of violence and the fear of violence. This was the week of the Batlish hearings, fulminating in the Senate, furor in the streets. This woman's nomination had ignited a firestorm, as the radio liked to hype it. Protests and counter-protests in Washington, D.C., in the nominee's hometown of Philadelphia, and in plenty of other places besides. Violence. Violence and fear. There was some little local controversy, too, about a fundraising effort called Susie's Closet. Folks getting together in church basements to make care packages for the plantations, blankets and candy bars and all that kind of thing. First, they interviewed a local advocate for the homeless, asking why our attention should be down there when there's so much suffering right here at home. Then came a spokesman for the Black Panthers, denouncing the campaign as mere ameliorationism, calling Susie naive, which struck me as a little harsh, the girl being 9 years old and all. It was the usual stuff. All the new stories are just the old stories over again. I turned off the radio and fished a Michael Jackson cassette out of the glove box. The tape hissed when I pushed it in. It was a mixtape that I had made myself many, many years before. Soon they were saying new cars wouldn't have tape decks anymore, since the American market was finally catching up with CDs. Not yet, though. I turned up the volume, MJ sang Human Nature from Thriller, and I sang along. I was stopped at a checkpoint on my way back to my hotel, which I'd been expecting. Tensions were high because of the Batlish business, and because of a couple nasty incidents up along the 49th parallel. Indianapolis, like a lot of cities, had declared a heightened security environment, so cops were free to pull over black drivers when they felt like it, not like they ever needed a reason in particular. It was at 79th Street and Ditch Road that I heard the bloop-bloop of the sirens, and I got out slowly, giving no trouble, showing my hands, standing where they told me to stand, staring blankly into the doorway of a grocery store while I got frisked by a beefy patrolman with bad breath and razor burn. He looked closely at my papers. My papers held up just fine. The sun was almost done sinking, a yellow smear against a dishwater horizon.
I picked up 2 nonfiction titles in this current sale, as I already mentioned. The first one is called Lone Survival, the eyewitness account of Operation Red Wing and the lost heroes of SEAL Team 10. This is by Marcus Luttrell and Patrick Robinson, narrated by Kevin T. Collins. And of course, you might be familiar with it from the movie Lone Survivor, which came out a few years ago. The other title that I picked up on the nonfiction side is by someone who fascinates me endlessly. It is Kevin Mitnick. He is a famous hacker. In fact, he may be the world's most famous hacker. That is certainly evident by the title of this book, The Art of Invisibility. The world's most famous hacker teaches you how to be safe in the age of Big Brother and big data. And this is narrated by Ray Porter. I picked up Ghost in the Wires, Kevin Mitnick's first book, a few years ago and absolutely loved it. He fascinates me. He was a hacker starting back in the 70s. He got caught. He went to jail. He came out, and now he has a security consulting firm, and his job is to help people to keep from being hacked by people like him back in the day. So he sort of transformed from a black hat hacker to a white hat hacker, and this book came out on Valentine's Day of this year. Added it to my wish list immediately, and if it hadn't been part of this sale in September, I might have picked this one up before the end of the year regardless and just spent a credit on it, and it would have been fine by me to do so. Happy to get it for the sale price of $4.95. And now I'm going to play an excerpt narrated by Ray Porter of The Art of Invisibility by Kevin Mitnick, which you can get in the current Audible win-win sale.
You would think that given how fast this happened, in just a handful of years, we'd be reeling from the shock and marching in the streets. Actually, the opposite is true. Many of us, even many readers of this book, now accept to at least some degree the fact that everything we do, all our phone calls, our texts, our emails, our social media, can be seen by others. And that's disappointing. Perhaps you have broken no laws. You live what you think is an average and quiet life, and you feel you are unnoticed among the crowds of others online today. Trust me, even you are not invisible. At least not yet. I enjoy magic, and some might argue that sleight of hand is necessary for computer hacking. One popular magic trick is to make an object invisible. The secret, however, is that the object does not physically disappear or actually become invisible. The object always remains in the background, behind a curtain, up a sleeve, in a pocket, whether we can see it or not. The same is true of the many personal details about each and every one of us that are currently being collected and stored, often without our noticing. Most of us simply don't know how easy it is for others to view these details about us, or even where to look. And because we don't see this information, we might believe that we are invisible to our exes, our parents, our schools, our bosses, and even our governments. The problem is that if you know where to look, all that information is available to just about anyone. Whenever I speak before large crowds, no matter the size of the room, I usually have one person who challenges me on this fact. After one such event, I was challenged by a very skeptical reporter. I remember we were seated at a private table in a hotel bar in a large U.S. city when the reporter said she'd never been a victim of a data breach. Given her youth, she said she had relatively few assets to her name, hence few records. She never put personal details into any of her stories or her personal social media. She kept it professional. She considered herself invisible. So, I asked her for permission to find her social security number and any other personal details online. Reluctantly, she agreed. With her seated nearby, I logged into a site, one that is reserved for private investigators. I qualify as the latter through my work investigating hacking incidents globally. I already knew her name, so I asked where she lived. This I could have found on the internet as well, on another site, if she hadn't told me. In a couple of minutes, I knew her social security number, her city of birth, and even her mother's maiden name. I also knew all the places she'd ever called home, and all the phone numbers she'd ever used. Staring at the screen with a surprised look on her face, she confirmed that all the information was more or less true. The site I used is restricted to vetted companies or individuals. It charges a low fee per month plus additional costs for any information lookups, and from time to time it will audit me to find out whether I have a legitimate purpose for conducting a particular search. But similar information about anyone can be found for a small lookup fee and it's perfectly legal. Have you ever filled out an online form? Submitted information to a school or organization that puts its information online, or had a legal case posted to the internet? If so, you have volunteered personal information to a third party that may do with the information what it pleases. Chances are that some, if not all, of that data is now online and available to companies that make it their business to collect every bit of personal information off the internet. The Privacy Rights Clearinghouse lists more than 130 companies that collect personal information, whether or not it's accurate, about you. And then there's the data that you don't volunteer online, but that is nonetheless being harvested by corporations and governments. Information about whom we email, text, and call, what we search for online, what we buy, either in a brick and mortar or an online store, and where we travel, on foot or by car. The volume of data collected about each and every one of us is growing exponentially each day. You may think you don't need to worry about this. Trust me, you do. I hope that by the end of this book you will be both well-informed and prepared enough to do something about it. The fact is that we live with an illusion of privacy, and we probably have been living this way for decades. At a certain point, we might find ourselves uncomfortable with how much access our government, our employers...
That is going to do it for this sale alert covering the current sale at Audible.com, the win-win sale. Over 300 titles priced at $4.95 each. This sale runs through September 17th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. If you are not an Audible member, you can go to audibletrial.com/talkingaudiobooks. And if you go there, you can sign up and get a free 30-day trial of Audible.com. And as part of that trial, you will get one free audiobook of your choosing, which is yours to keep regardless of whether or not you continue with your Audible subscription past the 30-day free trial. And we would encourage you to go use that link to sign up, as that helps us out here on the podcast. If you sign up for that free trial, you will be a member and you can access the members only sale going on right now, and you can pick up a few extra books for less than $5. You can check us out on the web at talkingaudiobooks.com, facebook.com/talkingaudiobooks, and twitter.com/talkingaudio. I am Audiobook Casey, that's Audiobook CASEY, all one word, at Facebook, Twitter, and Goodreads. Always happy to connect with fellow audiobook lovers. If you made a purchase from this Audible members only sale, we'd love to hear about it. You can email us at feedback@talkingaudiobooks.com. Let us know what you bought. Did you buy something that I talked about on the podcast today? Did you buy something that's been in your wish list for a while? Did you buy something that happened to catch your eye as you were browsing the sale? Whatever the case may be, let us know at feedback@talkingaudiobooks.com. We'd love to hear about whatever it was that you purchased from the sale, if you purchased anything at all. And maybe you didn't. Maybe you took a pass, and that's fine too. We just want to bring these sale alerts to you so that you know what's going on and how you can get audiobooks at a discount. As I've mentioned on previous sales alerts, we do not get paid for these. We do them as a public service. The titles that I feature on these sale alerts are titles that caught my ear or got my attention. Nobody suggests them to me. I pick them all on my own independently. So I want you all to keep that in mind. And as I said, that is going to wrap it up for this week. I wish you happy shopping if you browse the sale. And as I do on every podcast, I just want to encourage you to keep listening.
Thanks, Casey, for another great episode of Talking Audiobooks. Talking Audiobooks is hosted by Casey Trowbridge, produced by yours truly, Ken Joy, is produced by Ken Joy Media, copyright 2017, all rights reserved. All the music you hear on Talking Audiobooks is licensed through epidemicmusic.com. If at any time during one of the clips that we're playing from an audiobook here on the podcast you happen to hear this, it means we've bleeped out a word that is unsuitable for the rating this podcast carries on iTunes. It does not appear in the actual audiobook when you purchase it from Audible or another vendor. The information and opinions you hear expressed on the podcast are those of our host and our guests and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or beliefs of our sponsors. Make sure you visit the website at talkingaudiobooks.com and enter this month's giveaway. See you next time.